So it's that time. It's that time. We have a lot of hummingbirds that are coming across I guess they've been here since April, so it's not that they're new. And it's time to get your hummingbird feeders out. And one of the biggest pain in the necks for me is having to make sure that I'm replacing my hummingbird food, because it begins to foul after 2 or 3 days, and it basically turns into like alcohol mostly. And so if you're using you can make your own. You can make your own with regular sugar and things like that. But one of the best things that I found for me, because I don't have a lot of time, is Nectar Defender. Nectar Defender, it's in different hummingbird mixes. So you get, it's the same way where you mix it with water. In that, people say, oh, don't use red. It's like, well, the red now that they have as far as hummingbird food nectar is that made mostly out of hibiscus flowers, so it is natural. So don't get all freaked out because you're using red. I like red just simply because at a glance I can see how much nectar is left in my feeder, and then I'll know, all right, I need to get it changed tonight, tomorrow, what have you. But again, it has to have Nectar Defender in it. It also can be purchased as an additive to your own nectar that you're making, whether you're making it out of sugar or you're making it out of one of the popular brands of nectar. Now, hummingbirds are pretty amazing. That they get here after flying across the Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico. Now you know where I'm talking about. That they'll fly here and get here sometime in April. And in this area, we get the ruby-throated hummingbirds, and that they weigh less than a nickel. Okay, so if you those of you out there that don't know what change is, a nickel is bigger than a dime, smaller than a quarter. But that's what they weigh. The males have that iridescent ruby throat, but the females don't. So they're still green and iridescent, but they don't have the red throat. And do they sing? No. They make kind of like weird noises. They click. And that they sometimes there's like a little sharp chattering, but my hummingbirds, that they'll click, and especially like when they're getting in a territorial thing, because they can be, man. There's some fights that happen where one will zoom into the other one and zoom in to try to chase it off, and that hummingbird is beating its wings 50 to 70 times, not per minute, per second. And that's pretty amazing. So it sounds like a wasp or a bee. It's a bird. It's not an insect. And that's what you'll hear first a lot of times. So you'll hear that thing, you'll think it's a bee, but it's actually a hummingbird. Now, again, they don't really prefer a habitat, but they do have a territory where they know. So if your feeders are full and you're keeping them clean and you're using Nectar Defender, that you will end up having those hummingbirds come back. It's like they go on a route. They're like, the paper boy, where they'll come out and they'll, or paper person, I guess is appropriate, that they'll go feeder to feeder to feeder to flowers. And in the studio, we have Coffea, which is a highly attractant annual flower for hummingbirds, sometimes called cigar plant, but it has these orange little deep-throated flowers that flower all summer long, and it's a great hummingbird protector. So what about, so the birds and the bees part, where now they will have, let's see, so they will breed, and that after mating, a female will lay like 2 to 3 eggs. They're tiny. Incubate them for only like 12 to 14 days. So up to 2 weeks until they hatch. And then she'll continue to care for them for another 18 to 21 days. So you're talking about another probably 3 weeks. And keeping them warm, and that she'll go and feed them nectar. And that there was one, I was talking to somebody that was a hummingbird person, and they were talking about how it's like ant moats. It's like, well, you want to have an ant moat so that they don't get ants in your nectar and things like that. And they were making the point, it was like, well, the hummingbirds eat insects too. So aren't they going to eat the ants? Probably. But I don't think I want to have ants crawling and feeding and massing over my feeder. A couple of ants, no problem. But the problem is once the ants know that there's nectar available and there's basically sugar water that they can use for the rest of the hive, that guess what? You're gonna have a mess on your hands. So yes, they will eat insects, but I can't rely on that because of just a problem that ants can cause at my own home. Let's see. They have to eat often. Hummingbirds have to go from plants to they need, like some people say, it's like, well, do we really need to feed the birds? And the answer to me is always yes, but hummingbirds even more so because they need so much to keep up their metabolism. So having our feeders are a huge benefit to our hummingbirds. Especially like now, like there's not as many plants and that are available. And this week we had some colder weather come in, and I'm cold. I mean, it was like 80. Now it's like in the 60s, but they can go and put themselves in a state and it's torpor, where it's a state where they slower their respiration. It's an amazing thing. I mean, hummingbirds are probably the coolest thing. I've had one where it somehow got into my screened-in porch, and I had to catch it and bring it outside. And I did, gently. And for the brief moment it perched on my finger before it flew away, it was like an amazing thing, because here you have this super fast darting bird, and that where it just was amazing. And where some people will put enough feeders out and will keep them, and look, you have to be real clear that if you're going to put feeders out, you need to keep them clean, and you need to make sure that you're changing the nectar. Even if you're using Nectar Defender, it still needs to be changed on time, or you're going to, basically you're going to chase your hummingbirds away because they're going to go to it and it's going to be fouled or spoiled, and they're not going to want to go to you. So what kind of plants do you want to put in? Quick list. Milkweed. Benefits. Both hummingbirds and butterflies. Clematis. Great open flower. Daylilies. One of the best, cardinal flower. Cardinal flower, because they love that red. And it's interesting where some of the articles that we've done, we talk about how if you put just the color red in your yard, that hummingbirds will zip down to take a look of what it is, where they did some studies where they just took a bright red ball and the hummingbirds will zoom down just to check it out, to see what it is. Some other flowers, again, that work: Liatris, lupin, morning glories, bee balm. Bee balm's big. Bee balm's big. Let's see. Buddleia, trumpet vine. Trumpet vine. I was in, Aaron, by your house. They're grown wild. Yeah.
And trumpet vines were driving me crazy when I first moved to my house.
Right.
They're I guess the previous owner had a hedge filled with trumpet vine, and it was dropping berries and all types of stuff on the ground, or whatever was coming out of the middle of the bells. But they would turn bright red, and then they would kind of go like a dark, kind of like a brownish color towards the end of their bloom. And I mean, I had all types of insects, all types of stuff attracted to that hedge. It had to go.
I mean, because trumpet vine climb.
Yeah, and it was entangled in with the wisteria.
Oh,
so
you got double.
Yeah, I had vines everywhere.
What's the park by your house?
The state park, or that would be Wharton.
Okay,
Wharton,
so Wharton State Park,
or Atzian, either one. They're both
went there, and that they have wild trumpet vine growing, and that you'll hear the hum of the hummingbirds massed in the trumpet vine when they're in flower. So it's a great plant.
But to your point, it definitely does attract hummingbirds for sure.
And it's again, it can be a weed left unchecked.
Oh yeah.
Again, like the milkweed. I honestly am not a big fan of milkweed. I think it's overrated. It's one of those things that's supposed to be a perennial, but it generally doesn't stay in the same place. It ends up where you have it, and then all of a sudden it comes up somewhere, that it's not supposed to be. But again, make sure you're filling your feeders often and emptying them often. And then when you clean it, you have to make sure that it's not you just throw it in the dishwasher. You've got to clean out the ports and make sure that there's not any mold that's growing in there. You soak it in some mild bleach, like say a half a cup of bleach to a gallon of water, and you want to make sure it's rinsed off really well. Because again, they're really sensitive. Think about this bird that weighs, about the weight of a nickel, that a little bit of residue, whether it's spoiled nectar or whether it's bleach or whether it's something else, that they can really get harmed. So you've got to make sure that you're changing your nectar, because again, it ferments. That, like, if you're using sugar, it ferments in hot weather, and it's toxic to the hummingbird. So you got to clean that feeder. If you're not using Nectar Defender, you've got to clean it every 2 to 3 days. The higher the temperature, the more often you need to clean and swap out your nectar. So just make sure you're doing that, because that's the most important way to keep hummingbirds coming. If you're not, you're not going to have as many hummingbirds as you think. So again, feed your hummingbirds, keep it clean, use Nectar Defender, and you'll have hummingbirds. And then again, if I see another plant where the cigar plant is a major attractant. There's different types of salvia that are a huge attractant. Go to your local garden center. They have that information that you want of what plants attract hummingbirds. And again, just make sure you're changing your nectar, changing it out, and keeping those feeders clean.